Now, my understanding is that when it was first produced, it didn't go down particularly well, and he had to revise it a number of times. Is that right?
Absolutely. The opening night was in La Scala, and what happened was actually the reception was pretty bad. The audience was very chaotic, according to what was reported by Ricordi and some of the journalists and the critics that were there that night. And even Puccini actually, on second thoughts, he said, maybe we should change something in this opera. So actually, 3 months later, when what is called the second version of Madama Butterfly happened in the Teatro Grande in Brescia, not far from Milano, already lots of changes happened to the opera, among which the most important one that was the aria of the tenor in the last act, Addio Fiorito Asil, was introduced and presented to the audience. In this second occasion, the opera was very successful, and it was then the version that became the mostly famous one and the one that is mostly performed nowadays. There is a curiosity that is a few years ago, in occasion of the opening night of La Scala, Riccardo Chailly actually decided to restage the first version, so the Milan version, the first ever written. And it was an interesting curiosity for us nowadays to listen 100 years later what was like the first version and what type of changes happened through the story, both in the music and also in the libretto.
And do you agree that that first version was a failure?
Well, I think a big influence was coming from the audience. La Scala has always been a very difficult audience, I must say. And maybe on that occasion they were ready to criticize Puccini. So let's say they came already in a kind of challenging mood to see what was wrong in Puccini's opera and ready to boo at every moment. I must say that listening to the first version was a surprise, especially in the first act. Puccini was much, let's say, kinder towards the soprano, and he didn't have a lot of top notes, so it was definitely kinder, and some symphonic parts were longer. So he decided, as very often Puccini does, to improve a lot more the action. Puccini, you have to remember that he was a man that was born in the same period when cinema was born. And being one of the richest people in Italy, he was very much updated with the technique, with what was going on in the world in terms of updates, news. So when he got to know about the movie, actually we discovered recently he was one of the very first men in Italy on which they created a documentary. This was done in 1913, just before the First World War. And this type of information nowadays is very important to understand what type of dynamics went behind these operas. So you see that there is always a lot of action, and very often in these discussions with the librettists, with Giulio Ricordi, his publisher, he mentions this fact: I don't want them to be steady on the stage and sing for 20 minutes. I want something happening. I want things going on. And we can see very clearly this aspect in the second version of Madama Butterfly.